Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. Braden Bushby, the Thunder Bay man convicted of manslaughter in the death of Barbara Kentner, is back behind bars. He was originally sentenced to a nearly 8-year prison sentence, but Bushby was granted day parole in August 2023, and that was continued in January 2024. That day parole was revoked on July 23rd after breaching some of the conditions of his parole. Bushby was found guilty of manslaughter in 2020. In 2017, he threw a metal trailer hitch from a moving vehicle that hit the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation woman in the abdomen. Barbara Kentner died of her injuries 5 months later. The Parole Board of Canada decision notes Bushby breached the condition not to consume alcohol when he was stopped by police and failed a breathalyzer in late April. He was also in the company of a woman who was assessed not to be a positive peer. The Parole Board also questioned why Bushby got a tattoo of a Confederate flag on his chest while on day parole. He will be eligible for parole again in 1 year. Calgary-based TC Energy said on Tuesday it is selling a $1 billion stake in natural gas pipelines to a group of 72 Indigenous communities. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Details of the agreement were announced at a press conference on Tuesday. That $1 billion is buying a 5.34% stake in TC Energy's Nova Gas and Foothill pipelines, which cover 25,000 kilometers of natural gas pipelines across Western Canada. And 72 Indigenous communities from Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia are part of a consortium that will be the part owners. They hope to have a steady income from natural gas.
For many years, we've talked about sovereignty, but you really can't have true sovereignty until you have financial sovereignty.
Alberta's Indigenous Opportunities Corporation supports Indigenous investment in agriculture, telecommunications, transportation, and natural resource projects. It is guaranteed the billion-dollar loan needed to make the purchase.
It's about ensuring Indigenous peoples are active at every level of the economy as owners, workers, and partners.
Because if there's one thing that brings people together, that thing is having a good business opportunity.
TC Energy made the sale to pay down some debt and advance reconciliation efforts.
It's nice when you can kill two birds with one stone. We're going to view this as an opportunity to learn, and if it accomplishes a corporate objective at the same time, all the better.
The deal is expected to be finalized in the next few months. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
A Manitoba columnist has written a book on Indigenous peoples called Treaties, Lies and Promises: How the Métis and First Nations Shaped Canada. For more than a decade, Tom Brodbeck wrote about Indigenous issues, but his opinions often upset Indigenous communities. At one point, chiefs in Manitoba accused him of racist thinking and asked for a boycott of the media organization he worked for. He's never spoken to APTN about his columns until now. T.R. Wheatley did a one-on-one interview with Brodbeck in Upper Fort Garry, an iconic place for the Métis Nation, and a place he writes about in his upcoming book.
Thank you for being here with me. Can you just introduce yourself and what it is you do?
Sure. My name's Tom Brodbeck, and I'm a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press, and I've been a journalist for 30 years in Winnipeg. So
you're writing a book. Tell me a little bit about your book.
So the book is called Treaties, Lies and Promises, and it's a book about the contribution Indigenous people made to Manitoba and Canada, in particular Manitoba's entry into Canada. But it's also a book about how Indigenous people have been marginalized and excluded and dehumanized in many cases, and it gets into the stories that surround colonial governments and colonial settlers. And I don't think you can understand where we're at today for many complex issues without understanding those stories and knowing those stories. You don't have to be an expert on the Red River Resistance or the numbered treaties, but I think if you want to really understand where we're at as a province and a country, you really need to have a sense of what those stories were all about.
The underlying issue here people want to know is why you to write this, considering your background and some of the columns you've wrote about my people in the past.
I wrote an apology column in the Free Press a couple of weeks ago after I was called out on social media about some of the columns I wrote 10 years ago when I worked at the Winnipeg Sun. I'm ashamed of those columns that I wrote. When I read them today, I'm embarrassed by them. I've changed my views after educating myself and learning more and talking to Indigenous people.
I mean, many people called you a racist. Mm-hmm. Would you consider yourself?
I don't, no, and I don't think I ever have been, but I drew wrong conclusions about issues such as missing and murdered Indigenous women inquiry, issues such as Gladue reports in court where the courts are being asked to consider the historical background of Indigenous offenders when sentencing. I drew wrong conclusions when the Canadian Museum of Human Rights offered Indigenous people free admission. And my conclusion was that people should never be treated differently based on their race, including Indigenous people who form a unique group of people within Canada. And I was wrong in that conclusion. And it was based on ignorance.
What's that pivotal point? I mean, you can't just go from calling out Indigenous people time and time and time again, and then just suddenly, hey, you know, I'm your ally now.
I accept that criticism. It's completely valid. You know, I don't think there was any one pivotal moment. There's been a journey that I've been on for the last 5 to 10 years that has slowly transformed my thoughts and my beliefs.
Do you ever think about your words and how they could have spewed hate in other people who already had it? Example, you know, we're in this city where they call it ground zero for missing and murdered Indigenous women. I mean, like, I could think of Sean Lamb, the recent Skibitsky. Like, they could have been using your words to fuel themselves. Do you ever think about that?
I do now. I didn't at the time, but I recognize now that those words and those columns fueled racist sentiment and gave people a license to think that way and to behave that way. That's part of the harm that I caused.
Any of the Indigenous community, have anybody kind of like helped you along the way with this book? Like kind of endorsing you and encouraging you?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Chief wrote the foreword for my book, and we've been friends for a long time and developed a relationship, and I've learned a ton from him, and we talk all the time, and he enlightens me on many things. I've been speaking with the MMF, the Manitoba Métis Federation. They're reading an advanced copy of the book, and I've talked to them a lot about these issues as well.
Have you reached out to, I could think of a few, Terry Nelson, who at the time when you worked at the Winnipeg Sun, as well as Chief Derek Niepenack, who were asking for a boycott of this this media place that you worked at because of your words?
Yeah. I haven't, but I would like to. I would like to keep reaching out. Yeah.
As somebody who likes words and stuff, it was definitely well worded, your apology. It almost reminded me, though, of the 2008 apology from Stephen Harper, where it was very, like, rehearsed, kind of, like, saying you're sorry, but you're not sorry.
It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't, it was genuine. It's emotional. It's very emotional for me. And all I can say is people can change their minds. People can be wrong, and it's okay to admit you were wrong. And I'm admitting that I'm wrong. I'm admitting I was wrong.
And you can watch part 2 of TR's one-on-one with Tom Brodbeck by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca, or by visiting our APTN News YouTube page. Still to come, we'll hear from some of the team behind Star Wars: New Hope in Anishmuin. Stick around. Welcome back. It's something they only heard stories and saw pictures of. But now a family displaced from Denendeh in the Northwest Territories is returning to their motherland for a big reunion. Our reporter Charlotte Moore Jacobs brings us this heartwarming story.
It's been a trip of a lifetime for Lauren Horton and Sue Sears. The pair, along with 12 other cousins from across Turtle Island, have traveled great distances to retrace their roots in Denendeh, Northwest Territories.
And we got off the plane and there was aunties and cousins.
Laura's grandmother was Georgina Blondin, Satu Gutne from Toledo, and her grandfather, Bill Boland, came from Wales and worked for the Hudson's Bay Company. Georgina fell ill from tuberculosis in 1932. But before she passed in Charles Camsell Indian Hospital in Edmonton, she asked her nurse, Sue Sur's grandmother, Ruth, to marry her husband and help raise 7 children. After that, Ruth and Bill had 3 kids together and moved to Ontario.
So we're members of Toledo, our band, and we're members of the Saturn Land Corporation, but without living on the land, touching, feeling, swimming in the Great Bear.
The cousins have traveled over 3,000 kilometers across the territory to participate in traditional activities, making stops in Yellowknife, Hay River, Fort Resolution, Delaney, Fort Good Hope, Toledo, and Norman Wells.
I hadn't ever seen the Dene Laws before, and I was so moved. And the sharing.
They've met relatives like Ethel, Blonde, and Andrew.
And to also plan forward for the next generation, to not forget their ancestry and their homelands, and that. I think that's really important. I find coming back is really going forward.
Wherever they go, they do ceremony and pay their respects to relatives who died in residential school, and lay tobacco down at Bill and Georgina's old trading post cabin on Great Bear Lake. But after nearly 2 weeks, it's time to go home. Cousins Wayne and Dave Anderson say their sense of self has been strengthened.
No sense of identity. You know, as people or anything, I'm Dene, I know that. I'm from Toledo, I know that. Ever been there? No.
To be able to put our cup in the water, in the lake, and drink that water is so powerful, because you can't do that. We don't know anywhere in Ontario you can do that.
The trip has been cathartic.
Being able to do ceremony and shift the energy and the sense of grief, to shift that energy was incredibly moving for all of us in the family.
40 years, I tell you, it took to get enough nerve to come home, because the fear of not being remembered, the pain of not touching the land, the knowledge of why it was that the family was taken away in the first place, and it was residential school, our uncle passing, and then it was our grandmother getting tuberculosis that caused us to leave.
And for the family, it's the first of many trips to come. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
The Anishmuin language will soon be making its debut in an iconic movie from the big screen. Star Wars: A New Hope was translated into Anishmuin. What was that like for some of the team behind the project? Well, T.R. Wheatley spoke with some and has more in this story.
Amazing language project, and with such an iconic movie as Star Wars: A New Hope, and as we know it now, Anagung Migating.
Teresa Aishin of Little Grand Rapids is the Anishinaabe Okimaqwes Princess Leia. She recalls getting the good news late at night.
Shot out of my bed like a cannon. I don't know, it just felt so, running down the hallway saying, I'm Princess Leia, I'm Princess Leia. And I must have looked crazy, I'm sorry. So it was so memorable.
Aishin studied the lines in English first to get into character.
Her voice, the way she says things, the way Carrie Fisher said them. And so that's how I went about it.
Ajuak Kapashisit voiced Han Solo. He too shared the same technique his fellow co-star used when voicing Anagung Migating.
You know, the way that Harrison Ford has that intonation and the kind of the gravity in his voice, that like when he talks, you listen. And so I spent a lot of time, not even just watching Star Wars movies, you know, I just watch a lot of Harrison Ford, you know.
Kapashisit is an actor with ties to Moose Factory. He also works in language revitalization. When the time came to audition for the part, it was an easy choice because it combines his two passions in life.
When you're looking at how a language evolves over time, like you need these terminology to explore these things. So it was exciting to play with that and exciting to try some of that new language out. Yeah, it's a dream come true. It's kind of a dream job that you would always want to get, something like that.
A dream for so many, including the language duo Carrie Miller and Pat Negwans, who are behind the entire interpretation of Star Wars. They learned quickly that what translated on paper didn't always go as planned in the studio.
Sometimes we just scrap the original translation and come up with words that would fit the lip movements. So that's what you end up with. Phrases that will fit the lip movements.
But the result is when you play the film, like Carrie Fisher literally looks like she's speaking Anishinaabe.
Even more exciting, Pat's grandson is the voice of Luke Skywalker. And Jedi Muldrew is an Anishinaabe teacher from Lac Seul First Nation. This is also his first time dabbling into acting.
A little daunting though, yeah, play such a big role. So.
But with a middle name like Jedi, it's clear he comes from a family of fanatics. He soon learned his character isn't much different than him in real life.
He starts out, he's just a really young guy, doesn't know his place or where he fits in, and then as he kind of gets going through the movie, he finds a little more confidence. That's how I felt doing the role too, and not being experienced as an actor. But I brought my experience as a teacher.
Like his character Darth Vader, the man behind the voice is also multifaceted. Dennis Chartrand of Duck Bay and Pine Creek also played a part in translation.
My grandchildren will be able to hear this into the future.
Words, he says, are beautiful and have a lot of impact.
We have a responsibility, not as a burden, but in a great way that we can keep moving our language forward, because there's so much to it, so much that that sometimes even language speakers don't realize how it connects us to the earth, to our creator, and to everything all around us. We have to come up with some new words like lightsaber.
The project is a partnership between Disney, Lucasfilm, and APTN. It was funded by Heritage Canada. And Nikgung Migating makes its world premiere in Winnipeg on August 8th. It will air on the new APTN Languages channel later this fall. PR Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
It's great to be a part of it.
Pretty cool stuff, just days away from debuting. Time for one last quick break, but you'll want to stick around for the story of a First Nations woman who's competing in the world of motorsports. That and more still to come. Welcome back. A woman from the Enoch Cree Nation in Alberta has once again made history.
Ashley Collingbull! And congratulations to our first runner-up.
Model, actor, sports host, and activist Ashley Collingbull was crowned Miss Universe Canada last week at the Capitol Theatre in Windsor, Ontario, the first Indigenous person to win the crown. During the pageant, she put a spotlight on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada and how they are 6 times more likely to be impacted by violence or go missing. Collingbull says she will continue to use the platform she has to shed more light on MMIWG. The 34-year-old was also the first Indigenous person to be crowned Mrs. Universe in 2015 and to model in Sports Illustrated. You can see our interview with Ashley and the newly crowned Miss Indigenous Jessica McKenzie by visiting our website or our YouTube page. A First Nations woman in southwestern Ontario wants to take her passion for race car driving to the next level. Tamara Miracle earned her license to take part in racing competitions earlier this month, and she's set to take part in a women's race in the Middle East this December. APTN's Fraser Needham met up with her recently at the Motorsport track in Shannonville, Ontario.
Tamara Miracle is trying to live more of her life in the fast lane. On this day, she's pushing her personal car, a 2011 Chrysler 200, through its paces. But being a speed demon wasn't always at the top of her to-do list. It all started with a random Google search a few years ago.
I found a competition called Formula Woman on Google, and I kind of read up about it, and it's for women who have little to no racing experience. It's just to help get women into motorsports because women are not quite as out there in motorsports as the men are. So I found that, and they actually were holding an assessment back at Calabogie in 2022, and I thought, why not? Give it a try.
Since then, the member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, who lives on the Tyendinaga territory, has been an active member of Formula Women, taking part in racing competitions that have taken her as far away as the United Kingdom. On this particular day, Miracle is doing laps to complete what is called a racer observation. It's necessary to qualify for a regional racing license.
It's not meant for the track, but I make it work. I need to get out there and practice, and so I'll do what I have to do to be able to do that.
The car you got now, like we were talking about
Nathan
earlier,
Block of Brack Driving Concept is Miracle's personal instructor for the day. He has been competitively racing for decades. He says it's not so important what car is used as it is gaining an understanding of the rules of racing.
Understanding what the rules mean, what the flags mean, where you're supposed to park the car in the event of a red flag, things like that. So there's a lot more than can be explained in a 5 or 10 minute interview, but basically it's just making sure that when she goes out on track, she's safe and understands what everything means, and you have to know it because people's lives are on the line.
Miracle says she has learned a lot about racing in a short period of time, but the challenging part is gaining the confidence to apply what has been learned on the track and in competition.
I would have to say probably my confidence in myself. Like, it's a big thing because you're the one in control of the vehicle. If you're not confident, then you're not going to be able to do it. So it's just building that confidence for me, yeah.
Block agrees that part of becoming a successful racer is pushing your confidence level to do things you may have not tried before.
And then half the battle I do as a coach is trying to say, okay, here's what you did wrong. Here's why it went wrong. Let's learn from that, not do it again, and go back out there and try it again. Because yeah, racing's scary.
Race car driving is an expensive sport. Miracle estimates she has already spent several $1,000s just to get to the level she is at, but says she has definitely caught the racing bug and wants to go as far in the sport as she can.
It's the feeling of being out on track. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I guess it's just free. I just feel free. It's like my mind just calms down and I just focus, and it's amazing. I don't know how quite to explain it. It's just, I think everybody should go out and give it a try at least once to see if they like it or not.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Shannonville Motorsport Park, Ontario.
Really love that story. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this weekend. For news anytime, though, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.